Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 2 of season 4 of May I Ask a Question? It is a little bit crazy that we've been doing this for 4 years. I'm just going to adjust where you are there. Perfect. Um, I'm here for a bit of a lunchtime stream. I am actually working today, but I'm putting this in between my morning and my afternoon. You're here in the morning, I think, with the before
Yes.
work time zones.
Yes.
Uh,
I am under caffeinated, but I will try to help with code.
Amazing. Yes, so people who have seen previous episodes, I'm Chris Manson. I work with the learning team in Ember, and we have Jen with us. Do you want to
And I,
do a quick intro?
yeah, I'm Jen Weber. I'm also on the Ember Learning Core team. And I enjoy writing a whole lot. And I also appreciate the opportunity to come learn Ember together with Chris. Sometimes we come across unusual and interesting things.
Hopefully, it's not going to be too unusual today. We kind
Hopefully
of
not.
we found a well, bit of a backstory. Last week, we found a question that I was triggered. It was totally my fault. Uh, it was too much of an opinion question, and we answered it for almost an hour on stream, and it was deleted before the stream was even finished. So we,
In retrospect, that's reasonable. The
yeah,
rules of Stack Overflow are, it's not supposed to be opinion based.
yeah, totally
Still
my
was really
fault.
interesting to talk about, though. I just went straight past that aspect of it. I was like, well, here's a question that we can answer.
I think it turned out to be a very good episode of May I Ask a Question, even if we didn't answer one on Stack Overflow. So, we're going to do a slightly more sensible answer today. Somebody here has asked a month ago if they can, like, how to actually modify or change an Ember Mirage response in their test file. Um, they've given us some example code, which means that we can crack out the demo app and actually try and achieve a solution for them. And to be honest, looking at their code, I don't see the problem. So if we can try and recreate it and say works on my machine, at least we can show them what we did on a video, and maybe they can do the same things. And if there's something that they haven't quite thought of to include in the question, that's the wrong bit. Maybe they'll figure that out from us implementing it locally. So I'm going to start installing add-ons. I'm going to install Mirage. Do you want to give people who might be listening who don't know what Mirage is a bit of an intro?
Sure, I can do that. So Mirage is a tool that allows you to create kind of a testing server with API endpoints that return specific data you require. It has tons of features that basically allow you to have more confidence that the asynchronous parts of your app are working instead of just, defining like, oh, here's some like fake response that I'm going to override, fetch or something. That's very common in other testing frameworks. You don't override fetch, you don't override API requests. You actually create something that kind of follows the rules that a local server would. And you can use this in your testing environment, but you can also use it within your app itself. So back when I was doing a lot of rapid prototyping, um, oftentimes I didn't have the final data or endpoints that I was going to be working with for my from the backend, and so I could just ask the backend engineer, "Hey, what's the shape of this data going to be like? What are you naming the endpoint?" And I could set up my whole Mirage server, run my app, have it loading data from my little test server. And then when it was time for it to hit the real endpoint and just turn Mirage off, and it goes. And like my tests run and my app hits the real API. It's very, very cool. I feel that it's an important tool for bridging that gap in between the front end and the back end with regards to like the testing story and deployment confidence.
I agree with everything that you've said. I particularly like this idea that you're kind of you're working with something that's maybe described in like documentation but hasn't been implemented yet on the back end. That means that you have a little bit less tension between front end people being like, come on, back end, I need something to test against. Whereas they can just say, what, we've already described the API. I've made my front end mock thing follow the same description that we agreed on, and hopefully when we both are ready to ship, it's like I don't know if you know about this with the Channel Tunnel between the UK and France. They dug it from both sides at the same time, and then they met in the middle. And that's kind of the same. Both of us, front end and back end people, digging towards the same API and meeting in the middle, hopefully, if all goes well.
And it doesn't just do GET requests. I find that like if I'm mocking responses and things like that, it's really useful to be able to do patch and delete and all those things too, which if you configure, it takes some effort to like set that up in Mirage, but then like, ever after you have that resource that kind of behaves like a real API would. So yeah, in this question, let's see. Do you have the screen share? You're making your app.
Yeah,
here.
so I'm just kind of I've already copied across the default that they were talking about in their config.js.
Gotcha. Well, if you want to keep typing, I can talk a little bit about what I think this person is trying to accomplish. So in their app, they've already set up Mirage/config.js, which is where you define your endpoints that are going to be used for your Mirage server. And then they've defined a response that their API endpoint should return. That's all good. It seems probably working, but that's one of the things we're going to verify. Then in their test...
I've already started with console logs in my model just to make sure that we can verify it.
Yeah, we want to see that the basic setup is working before we get to their like special test case. So, and then their special test case, they want to override the response that Mirage would have given them. So an example reason for doing something like this is, say, making sure that your app can handle data that's in weird states gracefully. So for example, let's say you wanted to test that things looked a certain way if the response was missing the name key. This is something that happens with like really long-lived apps. You stop using a column of data, or you add it later, and then some subset of your data has nothing in that column, and then some things do, and you don't want to show not a number. You don't want to show undefined or just a blank space to your users. You want to handle it gracefully. And so putting that weird edge case into your Mirage responses might not be what you want to do, but creating like one scenario that makes sure this edge case is okay could be accomplished with overriding. And it seems that this person has written their override and it's just not hitting, it's not getting the response that they expect. So that's what we're going to be digging into.
So I've got it working now with the basic config. So essentially, this is what we were saying about the default, like the sensible responses. Let's say, like most of your tests will probably try and hit this, and it's good to have it in one place. That's working. I've got my console log responding with the foo description, foo whatever, and what I'm going to just quickly do. Each model has foo, because that's the thing that we're listing through. Then we'll have like foo dot ID, and what else do we have? Foo dot
Name.
name and description. Foo dot name and foo dot description. Let's see if that worked. I have
Can you zoom in a little on your console there?
On the console.
Bitty.
Fume, fume.
Yes, very small.
Like this.
Thank you.
So
Perfect.
I'm just going to quickly have a look at the response as foos. Did I say foos? Model dot foos. There we go. So we've got it. So the response comes back as like this foos array that has objects, description, ID, and name. And
good.
The thing that we want to do is essentially do a test to check that. And I'm going to just quickly, because I'm a big fan. Oh, no, this way. I'm going to generate a quick application test or acceptance test. Ember G acceptance test index, whatever. And in our test, the basic test is that we want to go to home, and then we want to do assert.dom body has text, and it's essentially this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, boom, and this is why you kind of put in the data into your situation, because it's really useful. Oh,
I think you've got to do set up Mirage hooks still.
Oh, this is too big
in that test.
Wow. So, unexpected token, blah. So exactly what you were just saying. What you'll see when you're looking at your app running locally, you'll see that even when you refresh, nothing happens. It doesn't try and hit the network. But if we do the same thing here, we refresh, it's trying to get foos from the real API. So as you say, boom. Where do we?
They have there's an example. They have it in the
in the question.
Stack Overflow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect. Ember CLI, perfect, yeah. Great. I was going to try and find the documentation, but it's something.
I mean, we can do that too, but they've already done the work. So
set up Mirage, and the way that they tend to work in Ember things is that you pass hooks in here, and then that's really just going to set up the bit of Mirage that stops you hitting the network. So you can see there, I'm refreshing, and now the network's gone away. Let's see why it's failing. Element body should exist. Huh? Assert.dom. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm going to just really quickly wrap this in a paragraph, because I thought you could ask it for the body.
I don't know.
I don't really mind. Oh, why? Oh, there we go. There we go. So I don't know what happened there, but it's now working. So element P has text, foo description, blah blah blah. But that's not what the user wanted to do. And we're saying that this is our edge case. For some reason, they want to do this. Now, this is right to me. I don't see a problem with that.
Well, so I'm wondering, I have a couple questions in my mind. And one is, we don't know what their response there was. Like, did they, are they getting some sort of error message, or are they getting the response from the other thing? Does this need to be prefixed with API is one of the questions in my mind.
Oh, that's a very good point, because that was a little sneaky description there. I think you might have found the answer. So
We'll
let's try
see. We'll
this.
see.
Let's try this. So let's do this as kind of test-driven development. Before I paste that in, what we want to do, this is going to be ID 20. So the ID is going to change to 20. Foo is going to become foo 3. And description is going to be empty. So that'll look like this, because they didn't include a
Probably.
description. Right. So we'll go to our tests. It's going to fail because we expect 20 foo 3. And then we're going to drop in. So here's an interesting thing. In our Ember tests, we have this await visit that actually goes to the root. And if you're overriding things in Mirage, you need to make sure that you do it before you actually go to the root, because it'll still use the old one. And I have a lot of red lines I don't like. ESLint fix file. Boom, magic.
Okay,
cool.
so that's maybe one thing. Let's
So-
see if that's the one thing.
Ooh, this is interesting. Result
Nothing.
nothing.
Ooh. I mean, I would
I would have
to see-
expected the old thing.
I mean, but if the API is a problem, then it won't find an endpoint. Because
Yeah.
if foos doesn't exist, API/foos is what exists.
Yeah. Let me just
Eventually.
hide this container because it gets in a bit of trouble. So here's a question.
But
Response.
Mm-hmm.
I found the issue.
What?
So we're console logging the response,
Yeah.
but whatever it's returning here is now a different structure to what it was returning before. It's got like status 200, like all this weird stuff.
Oh, there's more going on there, huh?
So maybe the problem here is the way that they defined this server.get. And to be honest, this .get foos, like, it should be the same as in the config, no? So like, if we want to like literally use the same structure but replace the foos objects with what they were defining, and the only thing that you need to change here is, like, they were doing this right, this .server.get foos, so you need to do the same. And then it should be the same syntax in the config as it is in your test, with, of course, that change where you need to do servers. Big bada boom. It's working. There's the
I'm
error.
confused.
So let me
You
show
lost me.
Let me show you. So let me show you. I did, and the reason I confused you is because I did two steps at once. So
so you just stopped using response.
Yeah. So
and
they
you just
did this
returned
new
the Pojo.
Yeah, exactly. Because they set it up in such a way here, which is essentially the same as, let's just remove it out of here. Just remove this. Return the Pojo. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what they had before. I didn't change anything. I just removed the variable declaration.
Mm-hmm.
And that now looks similar to what they had here. But of course, they've wrapped it in a response here.
Why is wrapping it in a response a problem, though? That I am perplexed
Good question.
By.
So,
I also, it might be interesting to demonstrate if you put await visit up above. Does the test fail? Would it be an interesting test? Because we have fixed two things now.
Don't see anything that's talking about response. don't know the difference. Okay, let's. What were you saying about awaiting?
Well, I think it would be interesting to show, like, okay, right now your test is passing, right? And then let's move the visit
Oh,
up above, because that was also,
no. I know what the problem actually is.
what is it?
It didn't crash. What is that response object? That response object is not the type of response that the documentation of Mirage is telling you to use. Have you ever had to use a response object in Mirage? So,
Nah,
most of the
I
time.
always just kind of handled my edge cases by just controlling when I passed it to my component.
Oh,
anyway.
yeah. Well, that's a good strategy. But using response in Mirage is quite useful for this number here. So let's say you had a route that you wanted to make sure that it worked if there was a 404. Like having an error come back instead of actually finding something is super useful to test route behavior. So you can't necessarily do that in a component test. And they're returning a new response, and they probably found some like documentation like this that said, you know, but look at this. Response is there twice in this response.
You have to import it from...
You have to import it.
Oh, is the response just like browser defined global thing?
I think it might be a node thing. We'll find the answer to that in a second.
Okay. Interesting. Quite interesting.
It still didn't work though. Let me try one last thing. If we look here, this.post config, this.post authors schema request return new response.
Oh,
and then headers.
Do we need to?
And then maybe there's a headers.
I also wonder, do they have, if this is just like a get in a model hook and it's a regular old fetch request, you'd have to parse the response and you wouldn't have to parse a POJO.
We're already doing that. Okay, there we go. It's now working.
Oh, okay.
So there's two things wrong here. One is that the type of response that they were using in their example wasn't the right type of response. And the second thing was that they were missing, they weren't following the API of what response is. Response is,
I see,
code headers body, apparently.
If you want to pull up the API doc for
this thing
method, yeah, it's API/classes/response.
Oh.
Oh, you're looking. Are you looking at it? Oh, you're looking at it. Never mind. I thought we were looking at a different example.
Doesn't really give you. So it's past the code headers and data into the constructor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So problems were visit. You have to visit your URL after you define the Mirage response. Did we do that?
Yeah.
Test?
So
can we do that?
Yeah. So that wasn't a problem that they were facing, but we can definitely do that test. So we can do the visit first. I was just
doing
I got
it backwards.
Well, no, I was just mentioning it that it's something like if you're trying to debug Mirage, it's something to make sure that you do correctly.
I see. Okay.
So it is true that if we did that, the test will fail again because it essentially you didn't override the server getter before it had a chance to try and get from the server.
So they had it in the right place.
Yeah.
But they were not using the Mirage response, and like we're missing some things from their
Yeah,
constructor that are
exactly.
quite important. Cool.
Yes.
All right.
And it's an interesting one because I just had a quick look here where it's like response is part of the fetch API. And
Mm-hmm.
like this would have failed if we were in a fast boot test or something like that, because that's a browser thing, not a JavaScript thing. So like there would have been cases where the computer would have told you that there was a problem here, but this was not one of them because we run our tests in the browser when we do this stuff.
Was there something where there was some recent thing? Fetch is getting added to Node environments, isn't it?
Yeah,
Did I read
yeah,
about that?
they are adding
It's
fetch
not
to
yet,
Node.
I don't think.
Yeah.
But
The problem was for the longest time is that actually there's like a stream, readable byte stream or something, and like there we go, there it is, readable stream on the body. Like if you've been keeping track of Node development, there's been like 4 or 5 different standards for Node streams that are all like slightly.
Oh no.
Yeah, and they're all like slightly better than the last. And like every time I hear somebody talk about it, it's like, oh, this is great. This is going to make everything much easier. But none of those streams are the same as the like web platform stream. So the interoperability between this API and Node was quite hard to do. And I think
I
somebody
believe
just
it.
made the last stream like, there's another standard, let's do another stream. And once that was done, it was much easier to bring fetch into Node.
Looks like I found a blog post by a company called LogRocket that says you need that fetch is available as an experimental feature in Node 17.
17, wow.
And this
the
is
future.
an article from March 3rd of this year. So
Did I ever show you Node Green?
no.
Can you see my screen?
Let me pull up that screen share. Oh my.
Oh my is right. This is like my favorite website.
Oh goodness. It makes me a little afraid to look at it, Chris.
It
This
is
is like
much,
can I use?
This is like can I use, but for JavaScript functionality in Node. Exactly that.
Cool.
And you have functionality down the left and version of Node up the top. Let's see if they've added fetch. They have not added fetch. So it's not in the list because I think this is actually specifically ECMAScript things, but again, fetch isn't that. But if you look at like things that are coming up in ECMAScript, private class methods, you can do private class methods in Node 14.
This is very cool.
It's very cool.
This kind of ties in a little to like one of the big challenges I feel in working in like modern web apps is like the split that you experience if you have a server-side rendered app, where it's like this side of the world needs to run in Node and will implode if you use Window. And then this side of the world is like fine to use all of that stuff. It's kind of, I just sometimes feel like, the tooling, this like core tooling that's at the heart of the web, it's still catching up to how we are building modern apps. Like, the idea that there's these different APIs are only available in certain environments, but you actually need both of those environments working in parallel replicated ways sometimes is a bit frustrating. Like, in an app I work on that's got server-side rendering, there's a handful of functions that are called safe function name. And safe function name, it's just wrappers that say, if window doesn't exist, do this thing. If window does exist, do this
Wow.
thing. And like you kind of those sometimes accumulate. And it's often, it's not your personal code that you're writing that even needs the window. Sometimes it's third party um, libraries and stuff
Yeah.
like that assume window is available. And so you kind of run into all these edges. I would love to see some of those, things like integrating fetch into Node is just one more thing
Yeah.
that will just kind of work nicely uh,
It's
and
another one
not
that
crash
like,
your whole app in server side
oh God.
rendering.
I had a bit of pain over the weekend with exactly one of these problems because
Mm-hmm.
I work on a lot of Empress stuff, so like server side rendering, static site generation, etc. Uh, and I got hit by ES modules not quite behaving the same depending on whether you import them or require them. So
Oh, interesting.
it's ridiculous. Like we're in modern world here and we import setup Mirage from blah 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 blah. Whatever the file is. In fact, do we have a better example? Yeah, no, I can't necessarily think of a better example, but what it looks like on this other side of this file is you have export default
Mm-hmm.
function setup or setup Mirage, So this thing is the default function,
Mm-hmm.
which works as we expect. That's how ESM is kind of designed to work. But if you in Nodeland did require, so const setup Mirage equals require the same thing, that is totally different. You have things that have to
Oh
like
no.
translate between things, and
Yeah.
actually you need to go set up Mirage dot default because most of the
Yep.
translate things like still have the default wrapper, and I had an entire add-on that needed to have a unwrap the default in a hacky way if you run it in fastboot land versus if you run it in browser land. I'm sure it's a
I see.
I'm sure it's a bug upstream somewhere, but it is like it's
The
very
the
gross.
import versus require was so deeply confusing to me as I would say, well, I was going to say as a new developer, but also as a current me. It's just like, why are there two ways to do this and they're not interchangeable,
Yeah.
like I mean, I've read a little bit about all the different formats that modules have taken over the years, but it's just kind of one of those things where if you're coming in fresh without any of the history, it just is baffling that you can't just use them both in the same file.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm like,
It's
this is doing the similar things. Like, why can't I do this? And it's like
yeah.
everything's kind of constrained, and trying to write the documentation for Ember things about how before there was Ember auto import, you had to handle some stuff yourself. You had to import things and say what kind of module they were. I once tried to figure out how to give some clues to people about how to figure out what kind of module something was. And I like couldn't do it. I spent like
No.
2 hours researching and I was like, this is an unknowable problem. And the answer is to just try each module name until one of them works. There's
That's
like several
amazing.
to choose
Oh
from.
my
That was
god.
always going to be faster than trying to introspect the file and understand, is this common JS? Is this ESM? Like, is this a browserified
Oh
something or other?
god,
And
yeah. God,
oh man,
browserify.
and this is a problem, this whole business of modules, just to be clear, it's like a Node JavaScript thing, not
Yeah.
necessarily an Ember thing, but like it used to be that you had to figure it out to make it work in Ember. Now you don't, but like,
I thought you were going to go in a different direction there when you were saying it was like an
Yeah.
unknowable thing. I thought you were going to say it's an unknowable problem and you just need to call Ed and get him to invent Ember Auto Import. Just sort it all out.
Yep. Yep. Ed's the only person who knows this. All the rest of us just whack-a-mole. Maybe one of these file types is the right one.
I have a deeper appreciation for all of the work that Ed does. Like this default wrapping thing that I was telling you about. I was like, oh, there's a bug here. I'm going to dig into it. I'll go a layer deeper. It's like, okay, I'm in embroider land for a second here. That's okay. It's not scary. Then I got to the Babel generated what was it, macro function that something wraps, imports and requires and stuff. And I'm just looking at this code and it's like you walk into a room and there's like, something has happened here, like something awful has happened here, and you're like, oh God. And I feel so much appreciation for Ed for keeping all of those gremlins away from us, like so we can just focus on the Ember stuff and like Ed can think about the hard stuff, of course, until there's a bug. But
and things like people working on Babel, the fact that Babel just works. We can write all these different styles of JavaScript and it lands in the browser and in the way that the browser can understand. There's like this whole other layer. There's a huge amount of labor that goes into making things usable for the average developer. And for that, we are thankful, because if I had to contend with all of these parsing things every time I wanted to add a button to a page, we wouldn't get very far. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So,
well, shall we come full circle to our? We're going to write up this answer after the call, but in general, maybe we post our. Here's a working code example, and just it's so nice to be able to give a straightforward answer where it's like you need to make sure you're importing response from Mirage. You must define the status and header. You're missing header.
Yeah, like it's a relatively easy answer, so I'll probably do it in the next 5-10 minutes, and they should hopefully have an answer to their question.
Yes. So, hopefully, Ember Mirage user, hopefully this solves your problem, and anyone else who listened along, if you haven't tried out Mirage, I encourage you to at least give it a go for like an demo app, sample app, hobby project. I think you would be. I feel like I couldn't live without it for my production applications. So take it for a spin. It will kind of change the way you think about testing your app as like a real app, as opposed to just kind of cobbling together, fake scenarios. So
copying and pasting like objects all over the place, and it's like,
oh yeah, saves you from that for sure.
Cool. So I guess we'll probably do another one of these maybe next week at some time. I don't know. But as TBD. I said, TBD, as I said, watch the socials. I am twitter.com/real8. Ooh. My fingers are not typing correctly today. So that's me, real8 on Twitter, and you are JWWWEEBER. So that's the I guess I can zoom in there so you can actually see it a bit better. JWWWEBER.
My web pun, the one I was born with.
It's brilliant. I love it. But yeah, so we'll tweet about our live streams, or if you're not already, don't forget to subscribe to May I Ask a Question and smash that like button if you like what we're doing. You just can't contain the laughter. But yeah, it's and we'll see you next week.
Bye.